Imagine an alien came to Earth one day without any concept of police officers at all. They just don't exist where he comes from and he doesn't understand what they are. And then he sees our police officer at work, running around the city, raiding people's homes, beating people with batons, tackling them, tasering them, blasting them with water cannon, cuffing them, throwing them into barred cages, and then shooting people dead on the street. It's possible that the alien might see our man in that context alone and form a rather one-dimensional caricature in his mind of what that guy is like. He might think, wow, what a violent maniac this guy is. What an evil monster he must be to run around the city doing that to people. This guy must be evil to do that. Now, conversely, if the alien came to Earth and he peered in through the officer's window one evening while he was at home, he might come up with another caricature from the complete opposite direction. He might see him being beaten up and pinned to the ground by this little human a quarter of his size and think he was extraordinarily weak, in fact. He might see him not intervening when his child is struggling to read their bedtime story and think, well, clearly he can't read the story either. He must be quite an idiot, this person. Wow, what a simple softie this guy is. What a weakling. Whichever side the alien witnesses first, it's possible that he could quickly form this one-dimensional caricature in his mind of what the officer is like. And he may have a great deal of difficulty believing that the other side could possibly exist within that same person. Are you honestly trying to tell me that that guy that I just saw out there on the street, beating people up, tackling them, tasering them, throwing them into barred cages and shooting people dead is the same one who's being beaten up by this little person a quarter of his size? And the one who can't read children's stories either? That can't be, that's nonsense. Okay, you're making fun of the new guy, I get it, you've had your fun, but that can't possibly be true. But of course the alien would only be confused here because he doesn't yet understand the fullness of a human character. We who do understand the situation know the truth about this. The officer is neither a violent evil monster and neither is he a simple softie. Those are both just misunderstandings and caricatures based on shallow understanding and limited knowledge. And while there would be an element of truth in each caricature, yeah, it is true that he can be quite scary at times, and yeah, it is true that he can be quite soft as well. Neither would be a balanced or complete portrayal of the man. Neither of these labels would be fair on that officer. And furthermore, we would understand that there's no contradiction in the officer sometimes being this and sometimes being this. In fact, it's the opposite. It's because of his goodness that it's perfectly consistent for him to be sometimes this and sometimes this. It's difficult not to create one-dimensional images of people though when you only have limited knowledge of them. I remember watching boxing with my dad when I was younger and finding it very difficult to believe that these people weren't kept in cages, to be honest. I'd see them going into battle barely able to contain their aggression, mouthing abuse at one another, teeth clenched, muscles flexed, veins popping. I'd see them pounding their opponent into a state of incapacitated unconsciousness, and I just think, wow, what a violent monster these people are. Surely they're a danger to society, in fact. It was difficult for me to witness that level of aggression and square it with the idea that once the bout is over, they would shake hands, embrace, compliment one another on a good fight, show respect to one another, step out of the ring, go home to their wives and kids, and be as compassionate and as gentle a human being as anyone else. No danger to society whatsoever. And yet in reality, that is largely what happens. And yet we see this in every walk of life, so it shouldn't come as a surprise. If you're a soldier, then you'll have to fight and kill terrorists on the one hand, but then distribute aid and food to innocent victims of war on the other. If you're a teacher, then you'll have to dish out strict punishments in the classroom to a pupil who cheats or misbehaves, but then lavish praise when they work hard to improve their grades. If you're a CEO of a company, then you'll have to fire an employee for laziness on the one hand, but then reward the others with a bonus for doing a fine job. If you're a personal trainer, then you'll have to drill clients with punishing circuits and be hard on them, but then encourage them when they reach their targets and be kind to them. If you're a judge, then you'll send criminals to prison to pay for their crimes and then happily pardon the innocent who are falsely accused and who have done no wrong. If you're a parent, then you'll have to discipline your children when they misbehave and then show gentleness and love when they need those things too. So we all do this. We all know what this is like. Whatever walk of life we are in, we all demonstrate both the hard virtues and the soft virtues at various times. And if people only ever saw one expression of our goodness in isolation, their limited knowledge could lead them to caricature you as well as either a violent monster or a timid, simple softie. Of course, neither would be accurate portrayals, and neither of those labels would be accurate or fair to you. And so we must be careful not to make this mistake with other people as well. And that's especially true when it comes to God. We have to be careful not to make this mistake with God. And the problem is that we often do, or if you're not a Christian anyway, non-Christians often do this. And the problem is that it's easier to do with God. Non-Christians will often mischaracterize God either as an evil monster or as a simple softie. You see, if it's possible to see the hard virtues alone in humans and mistake that for monstrousness, and if it's possible to see the soft virtues in humans alone and mistake that for weakness, how much more is that true of someone who is perfect in these virtues? Let me explain. God isn't just good as we humans are. He is absolutely good. He is perfectly good. Therefore, when that goodness expresses itself through the hard virtues, they are perfectly hard. And likewise, when he expresses his goodness through the soft virtues, they are perfectly soft as well. And it's these absolute expressions, these perfect expressions of good, that make God easier to mischaracterize and caricature. So for example, we humans believe in hard justice. So we punish criminals and evildoers and sin, and that is a good thing. God's justice, however, is perfect, which means that he not only punishes evil like we do, but he obliterates it entirely, because that's what perfect justice looks like. The complete elimination of evil, the destruction of evil. So God wipes evil from the face of the earth. And while a human police officer may look rather frightening as he enforces justice in a community, a perfect God looks utterly terrifying as he destroys evil and wipes it from the face of the earth, and as he enforces justice. Similarly, we humans believe in righteousness, so we believe in moral behavior, but God's sense of righteousness is perfect, and therefore he demands not just moral behavior like we do, but complete moral perfection. At the same time, we humans believe in soft love, so we try to give it to others where we can, and we encourage that. But God's love, however, is perfect, which means that he loves not just like we do, but he loves beyond measure. He loves beyond reason. We humans believe in compassion, grace, and mercy, so we try to practice those things in daily life as well. But God's compassion, grace, and mercy is absolute. It is perfect, so he lavishes it on people beyond reason and beyond measure. In other words, a perfect God is harder at times than we are, and he's softer at times than we are. His justice is more absolute than ours, but his love is more absolute than ours as well. His righteousness is more unyielding than ours, but his mercy is more extravagant than ours. And again, it's his perfection in these things that make God easier to mischaracterize, either as a violent monster if your knowledge of him is limited to the hard virtues, or as a simple softie if your knowledge of him is limited to his soft virtues. And this is indeed exactly what tends to happen. Without question, the most common way that people misunderstand God's character is by viewing his hard virtues or soft virtues alone in isolation. And then with that shallow, one-dimensional understanding, they create this imbalanced conclusion about what God is like. Having seen one side of his character, they then find it very difficult to grasp and believe that the other side could possibly exist within that same person. Are you honestly trying to tell me that the God who wiped out the world with a terrifying flood is the same one who's seen hanging weak and naked from a cross? Are you honestly trying to tell me that? That can't possibly be the case. That can't possibly be true. Sometimes people mischaracterize him deliberately because it's easier to dismiss and ridicule a God who's been caricatured in this way, either as an evil monster or a simple softie. Others genuinely misunderstand him, but whether it's purposeful or not, you will tend to find that the most people who have a shallow understanding of the Bible and of God have done this to some kind of extent. They picture God either as a monster or as a weak, wet, grandfatherly type of figure, I guess, who isn't worth bothering with. And then I guess us Christians as well, as his children, also get that a little bit as well. We are either misunderstood either as evil bigots when we express our goodness through these, or we are thought of as being soft, wet Ned Flanders types who aren't worth bothering with when we express our goodness through these. Richard Dawkins is someone who described God as a violent monster. He once said that God was arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. The Portuguese Nobel laureate José Saramago said something very similar. He called God cruel, spiteful, vengeful, jealous, and unbearable. Now, where could Dawkins and Saramago be getting such a monstrous image of God from? Well, they would argue they're getting it from the Bible. They would point to Old Testament stories in particular where God is destroying cities and sending plagues and floods and calling for the destruction of idols. And it's these events that would cause them to shout, "Look, what a bully, what an evil monster that God must be." On the other hand, there are people like Douglas Adams, the writer who penned Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He once said that Jesus was nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be if people were nice to each other for a change. Honestly, that's all he thought Jesus came to say. Be nice to each other, won't you please? Adams' view of Jesus is that he was a sort of hippie who went around calling for nothing other than peace and love. Now, why Adams thought Jesus would be crucified for merely saying be nice to one another is anyone's guess, and the fact that he was crucified should hint that Jesus did have slightly more hard-edged, controversial, and uncompromising things to say. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. All we need to establish in this episode is that two different people, Richard Dawkins and Douglas Adams, were presumably reading the same Bible and yet came up with these polar opposite views of what God was like and what the message of the Bible was. Both thought that they had the true grip on his character, but in reality, both were merely dealing in one-dimensional caricatures based on limited understanding. So let's fix that.